Luigi Mangione went to a prestigious private prep school in Maryland, attended Penn, an Ivy League school, for his undergrad and postgrad degrees. His family's wealth is in the 1% of the 1%ers. Yet despite all these advantages, the 26-year-old sits in a jail facing the possibility of life without parole. He is now charged with terrorism in New York for the assassination of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. And now another huge development in the case as the feds file their own murder charges against Mangione and reveal some new evidence in the case. Tonight, we'll have all the latest developments and in-depth analysis of the facts and the law in this year's biggest true crime investigation, the murder of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments, and we are going to take a deep dive this hour into this huge story. And things have really gone from bad to worse for the accused assassin, Luigi Mangione. Think about it. Today he went from Pennsylvania, where he had some weapons charges, nothing too serious relative to what he's facing, and was shipped back to New York, where he's facing extremely serious charges. Obviously, first degree in New York. The DA's filed terrorism charges against him. He's a terrorism defendant right now. But beyond that, now all of a sudden, the feds have charged him. And everyone's wondering, why are the feds in this one? I mean, we saw the crime on video. Somebody got shot walking down the street in New York City. Why are the feds jumping in here? We're going to talk about that because I think it's a big discussion, especially today with the unsealing of the charges by the federal government against Luigi Mangione. While the charges and what he has to face continue to pile up against him and get worse and worse each day, the support for Luigi is growing. It's growing online. People are starting to show up at the courthouse, etc. So this is someone who is taking on a role that usually is not played by someone who shoots someone walking down the street in New York, right? Extremely unusual what's taking place, but it's for real. It's for real. I don't know how much time you spent on social media looking at this, but there is a certain percentage of the population, and we're going to talk about that this hour as well. At the end of the day, I think another lingering question in all this is, will the victim, Brian Thompson, get justice in this case? Will his family get justice? And if your loved one's been assassinated, I look at it, justice is life, a minimum of life without the possibility of parole. This is premeditated, lying in wait, assassination of someone. That's got to be life without the possibility of parole. But it may not be life without the possibility of parole. We're a long way from there, so I think this is a fair question to be wondering about tonight. So let's take a look at what happened today. And we begin, we've got some video where you can see Luigi Mangione arriving at court. Again, this is in Pennsylvania because of the hearings that were scheduled today in Pennsylvania. A little different with the demeanor. He's not screaming. He's not unhinged. I think it's settling in, right? I think it's kind of settling in now. Getting used to, oh, yeah, I'm locked up. I'm not free to go anywhere. All right? It's a different life. It's a different approach. This isn't new anymore. This is every day for him. Now, I believe we've got him departing as well. So this is the departure video. And again, a level of composure there. Settling in as a criminal defendant. I don't know if that was a defiant look. I don't know exactly what's going on there. But this is much different than his first appearance. His first appearance, because all the media is there. So if he has something to say, he can scream it out to them. But he's not. Is he medicated? We don't know. We don't know. But really, appearing much, much different today. So, as I said, today was a huge day. There were a lot of developments in Pennsylvania, in New York, state court, federal court, in the air, in the plane, in the helicopter. And Ava Joy Burnett, legal affairs correspondent for Scripps News, has more for us tonight.
Luigi Mangione started his day here on Thursday in the Blair County Courthouse in Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania, but it ended in New York with even more charges. Thursday, the 26-year-old suspect in the assassination of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson appeared for 2 procedural hearings in Pennsylvania, where he formally waived extradition and was taken into custody by NYPD.
We are ready to do this now. We didn't do it before because we weren't ready. Today was the day to do it. This is in his best interest. We're going to move forward with a vigorous defense of these charges, and my mood hasn't changed one bit.
But by the time Mangione arrived in New York, where he was initially charged with 3 counts of murder, he was facing even more criminal charges, this time from the federal government. A new complaint from the Southern District of New York, unsealed Thursday afternoon, provides insight into the case against Mangione. An FBI special agent noting Mangione, quote, expressed hostility towards the health insurance industry and wealthy executives in particular. In a statement shared with Scripps News, Mangione's New York attorney suggesting the added federal charges are, quote, highly unusual and raises serious constitutional and statutory double jeopardy concerns. We are ready to fight these charges in whatever court they are brought, end quote. Pennsylvania officials, meanwhile, promising their case will move forward too.
Our intention is to keep our case active, and at the conclusion of the New York case, which obviously is the primary case against the defendant, and we intend to assist them in any manner that they might need, we'll evaluate our case and determine how to proceed.
In the Pennsylvania court proceeding Thursday, Mangione appeared calm, even jovial, at times smiling when chatting with his attorney. Outside the court, a small group assembled, holding signs indicating support for Mangione. The federal case will take precedence. Once that's completed, then the New York case will go, then Pennsylvania. In Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania, Ava Joy Burnett, Scripps News.
A lot of developments. And again, his demeanor so much different. And as Ava described inside the courtroom today, calm, smiling, things much more normal for him. But this is going to be his new normal. You know, a trip to the courthouse here and there. And in the meantime, 3 hots and a cot. That's all he's got. Let's bring in our think tank tonight. Joining us, criminal defense attorney Eklund Mercy. Also with us, retired criminal defense attorney Kirk Nurmi. And former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani. Welcome to everyone. What did you think of his demeanor, Eklund? I mean, the first time we saw him, the cameras were there. He knew the media. He had a message, and he was screaming something. Today, nothing from him. Absolutely nothing. Probably even more cameras there.
Yeah, I think he just talked to his attorneys, and you have the right to remain silent, and I think that he was just exercising that right.
All right, Kirk, do you think this is a turn from Luigi going from social justice warrior who's out there to get his message and make his mark in the world and spread his message any chance he has, to someone who's 26 years old facing the rest of his life in prison and is now going to zip it to try to do whatever he can to maybe have a life outside of prison someday?
I don't think he's done with his messaging. I think this is going to be the entire maybe thrust of the defense, this kind of jury nullification, a justification type of thing that his supporters seem to believe is accurate there. But I agree with Eklund. I think, he talked to his attorney, and what he's hoping to do really is to make his trial about that, make the public statements that his attorney make it about that, to really make it look more sane, if you will, as compared to some of this yelling and screaming. So I think it's just a dialing back and probably a reformulation of the message that he wants to get out to the world.
Yeah, ironically, Nima, this may be one of the last times we ever see him.
Well,
we
we're
may
not
never
gonna
see him again.
because-
I mean, he's going to New York. New York, there's no cameras. I don't think they walk criminal defendants out of the New York courtroom. They use all internal ways to get him in and out, back and forth to Rikers or wherever he's going to stay. Federal court, same thing. They bring him in usually underneath the building. He goes into court, goes to trial, pleads guilty, goes to prison. We never see the guy again. This may have been his last chance to speak to the public with a camera rolling.
Well, we know New York state courts don't allow cameras. Obviously, no cameras in federal court. We're going to see those courtroom sketch artists. But look, we did see him today in the perp walk, which was something, frankly, I've never seen, when the mayor who's under indictment is walking behind an accused murderer. So this case has taken on a whole nother layer of just politics here, with the feds swooping in. And obviously, we know, like Kirk said, this case is all going to be about jury nullification, probably less so in federal court than state court. But this is the most sympathetic accused murderer I've ever seen. We talked about Karen Reed recently, but they're an alternate theory of the case. Maybe going back to OJ, and I think even that case was the dislike and distrust of the LAPD. But I would be very concerned by the U.S. Attorney's Office or the DA's office about getting 12 out of 12 on this case, and it's going to be very difficult. Stealth juror may come in, and this case is ripe for jury nullification.
Okay, let's dive into some of the new things we learned in the federal complaint that was unsealed today. Take a look at this. Luigi was found with a notebook, several $1,000s in cash, an envelope associated with an FDIC-insured bank, and a letter addressed, quote, to the feds. The notebook contains several handwritten pages that express hostility towards the health insurance industry and wealthy executives in particular. In an entry marked as August 15th, the notebook described how the, quote, the details are finally coming together, and I'm glad in a way that I've procrastinated because it allowed me to learn more about UHC, which is UnitedHealthcare. The notebook entry also stated that the target is insurance because it checks every box. In an entry marked as October 22nd, the notebook stated, 1.5 months. This investor conference is a true windfall, and most importantly, the message becomes self-evident. Later on in the entry, the notebook describes an intent to whack the CEO of one of the insurance companies at its investor conference. As described above, October 22nd, 2024 was approximately 6 weeks before the date of the murder of the victim. And again, you look at that quote, the target is insurance, it checks every box. All right, Eklund, what does that tell you about this crime? Does this turn this crime into terrorism? That he's planning it 6 months ahead of time? That he's targeting the insurance industry and he wants to whack the CEO?
I think that making this case bigger than it is, they're making him a political prisoner. They are making him a martyr by, overcharging, by all these hands in one place. You're making him bigger than life. Like, it wouldn't shock me if he gets a Rolling Stones cover. Like, that's what's happening now.
Wow. Here's the Fed letter, okay? The Fed letter recovered from Mangione stated, I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial. Some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, and a lot of patience. The Fed letter also stated, P.S. You can check serial numbers to verify this is all self-funded. My own ATM withdrawals. You write a letter like this, Kirk, it sounds like he knew or was prepared for being arrested on all of this, which is interesting, right? So he's trying to get his message, at least to law enforcement in this letter, that listen, there's nobody else, it's all me, it's all me. That doesn't help him at trial, does it?
Well, in some ways it might. But, ultimately, by making this a terrorism charge and bringing in some of these issues, that brings up what we just talked about. I mean, what would otherwise be irrelevant, his motivations, et cetera, under the terrorism charge become relevant and open that door for that jury nullification. The other issue that it becomes, and if I'm his attorney, one of the first things I'm doing is getting mental health evaluations on my client. And the psychologists are going to see these, and they're going to look at his obsession, and they're going to work with that also at trial, whether it's at sentencing or some sort of mental health defense. So when you open up this door to his motivations for a murder that is on videotape and pretty clear, and you could limit it to his conduct in New York, that's going to bring up a whole bunch of issues. And as Eklund said, you know, his political martyrdom, et cetera. So it's going to make this trial more, unfortunately, not about the victim, but about the defendant and his cause.
Yeah, as I look at the pictures, he's so chilling. He looks like a killer in some of those pictures from my perspective. Like he's taking on that look, right, that we've seen in other cases. Now, I want to show you some more of the evidence, Nima. The gun, this is the 3D printer gun, was my understanding. The gun, the magazine, you've got this suppressor, silencer, and this evidence. And he kept it. He kept it, Nima. This isn't a case where there's a missing murder weapon. Like he's caught with the weapon itself. Does that, like, it's easier to prove and tie it to him, but does it tell us more about him? Will it tell the jury more about who he was, the fact that he held on to the gun while he was on the run?
Well, Vinny, he knew he was going to get caught, and he didn't leave the country. And the evidence in this case is overwhelming. You got the ballistics, right? He has the gun. You have his fingerprint at the scene. You have his DNA on the water bottle. You have the video. You have his manifesto. It's not a case that you can defend straight up on the merits and say, I didn't do it. And he doesn't just look like the killer. He is the killer. But Eklund and Kirk are right. This case was overcharged. You're bringing in lots of evidence that shouldn't come in. And this is really Alvin Bragg's MO. And he's gotten burned a couple times. He got the Donald Trump case and the Daniel Penny case we covered here on Court TV, overcharged it, had egg on his face. And now he's doing the same thing, where it could be a very easy case. You in limb, you exclude all this evidence. Now it's all coming in. Big problem. You better hope the feds save him and get a conviction in that first case. Otherwise, you might have a problem.
Let's take a look at this now. The federal indictment also says this. At approximately 5:41 a.m., the shooter walked around the area of the Midtown Hotel and at one point purchased items from a nearby coffee shop. The shooter then returned to a bench in the vicinity of the Midtown Hotel. On at least one occasion prior to the murder, the shooter was depicted using a cell phone. Eklund, I don't know, when they say using a cell phone, could be a call, could be, you know, you go on there to research stuff. You could be on the internet, but that's, to me, I'd be really interested as to whether or not he's communicating with anyone or getting information just prior to the shooting. That's to me, that's still an unanswered question.
Yeah, and if they don't have the information now, they shouldn't charge him with it. It shouldn't be on the indictment. I think that the bigger this case gets, the less it is about the victims, the less it is about the defendant, the more it is about his political positions. And like, if you're not going to connect that cell phone, if we do not have where the cell phone pinged from, if you did not run the trace before putting that charge on there, then you shouldn't have added it.
Kirk, look at this picture. The suspect with what we believe is an e-bike battery. We heard about this, now we're seeing it. To me, another part of the escape was, how could he just like that quickly jump onto a bike? Like, where did the bike come from? I'm thinking now that he planted the bike perhaps the night before, took the battery and kept that with him so no one else would take the e-bike, because without the battery, no one's going to take the e-bike.
Yeah, I think that's one possibility. I think the other possibility, Vinny, is the e-bike batteries, you know, you can only go so far on a charge. You might be able to go 30, 45 miles depending on the bike. So this could have been a backup situation for him in case he felt like he needed to go more. So he was really planning his escape, if you will, to make sure, you know, because he could have got a bike off the street, I guess, who knows, that morning, fully charged. But I think this could also be an auxiliary bike if he wanted to, or excuse me, battery, if he wanted to go even farther away.
Yeah, Nima, his escape was well planned to get out of the city, but once he got out of the city, that's where his plan fell apart, because he had no no place to go off the grid, no place to stay out of the public. And obviously it was going to be a huge manhunt. I don't know if he underestimated it, but it was planned to at least get out of the city because he did that pretty easily, pretty quickly.
And it was pretty effective, both getting into the city, the hostel, the fake ID, the bus ride, going through Central Park. But you're right. I don't know if he didn't care about getting caught. He planned to get caught, but most people would have taken off. They would be in a non-extradition country, and they wouldn't be eating at a McDonald's with the entire world looking for you for 5 days. So again, this is someone who's very smart. Probably haven't seen a criminal defendant this smart, maybe since Brian Kohberger, in terms of covering up their tracks. But here's someone that absolutely knew what he was doing.
All right, think tank staying with us. When we come back, we're going to take a look at these new federal charges and try to understand why the feds are in on this. It's a little murky from my perspective. Plus, coming up next hour. Coming up on Vinnie Politan Investigates, a teenager admitted into a hospital, gives birth by herself inside a hospital bathroom. The baby dies, and now this teenager is facing first-degree murder charges. We'll investigate the case of Alexi Treviso.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates, tonight, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV.
I'm Vinnie Politan. Welcome to Closing Arguments.
What's happening here?
It's unreal. Let me show you exactly what happened.
Closing Arguments with Vinnie Politan, weeknights at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV.
Superbeats.com.
Following breaking news out of New York City as police are searching for a gunman.
He ignores numerous other pedestrians, approaches the victim from behind, and shoots him in the back.
The person has been taken into custody in Altoona, Pennsylvania in connection to the CEO shooting.
We must do more on the federal level to clamp down on the availability of ghost guns.
It feels good to get a guy like that off the street.
We are here to announce that Luigi Mangione, the defendant, is charged with 1 count of murder in the first degree and 2 counts of murder in the second degree, including 1 count of murder in the second degree as an act of terrorism.
All right, that's huge, right? That's huge. But now the feds are in on this case and unsealed a complaint today against Mangione. Take a look at the charges we're looking at. Stalking, travel in interstate commerce, stalking, use of interstate facilities, murder through use of a firearm, and then a firearms offense. Now, usually murder is not a federal case. Murder on the streets of New York, you shoot and kill someone on the streets of New York, it's a murder case for the state of New York to deal with. And it could be, if it was in another state, it'd be for that state. I mean, usually when you talk about murder and federal cases, you're talking about federal property, you're talking about federal officials, you're talking about, you know, maybe someone gets abducted in one state and then dragged over state lines, things like that. You're in a federal a park, something like that. It's rare that a murder on the streets of a city end up in federal court. So let's take a closer look at this stalking, travel in interstate commerce. The defendant traveled in interstate commerce with the intent to kill, injure, harass, intimidate, and place under surveillance with intent to kill, injure, harass, and intimidate another person. So travel in interstate commerce, what do they mean? Mangione traveled from Georgia to New York for the purpose of stalking and killing Brian Thompson, and while in New York, Mangione stalked and then shot and killed Thompson in the vicinity of West 54th Street. So basically, they said he got on a bus. That makes it a federal case. Let's look at the use of interstate facilities, count 2. Mangione, while stalking, used an electronic communication service and electronic communication system of interstate commerce in a facility of interstate or foreign commerce. Sounds really fancy, right? Now, this is what he did. Mangione used a cell phone, interstate wires, interstate highways, and the internet to plan and carry out the stalking, shooting, and killing of Brian Thompson in the vicinity of West 54th Street. What's going on here? What's going on here? Why is this federal? Back with our think tank. Eklund Mercy, we're going to reconnect with her, but we have Kirk Nurmi with us and Nima Rahmani. Nima, you're the former federal prosecutor. From my perspective, okay, I was just a lowly state prosecutor. This is our case. This isn't your case. What are you talking about? Interstate commerce. The guy, you say he had a cell phone. Every criminal defendant has a cell phone. I could take half of the murder trials here on Court TV under this theory of, driving on a bus or using the internet to get federal jurisdiction. What's going on here, Nima?
Well, Vinny, I'll answer it first with a legal question and legal answer, and then give you the real answer. Legally, of course, the feds, they have limited jurisdiction, unlike state prosecutors have unlimited jurisdiction. And we know that Congress can regulate interstate commerce. So you have to have this interstate component, even to make it a federal case. So what they're really trying to do is stretch this and force a square peg into a round hole. And the reason they're trying to do this, Vinny, and we don't see these types of federal prosecutions. The only recent cases we've covered on Court TV were George Floyd and Derek Chauvin and Ahmaud Arbery and the McMichaels and Roddy Bryan. And those were civil rights cases. There was a civil rights reason. Here, Vinny, it's all political because a CEO was the victim and you have a president-elect who wants his Department of Justice to swoop in because he doesn't like Alvin Bragg, because Alvin Bragg prosecuted him. And obviously at the federal level, you can have the death penalty, whereas the death penalty in New York has been abolished for 20 years now. This is not normal. This is not typical. And this just adds fuel to the fire for people who are arguing and who are watching and saying that Luigi Mangione is being treated differently because of who he killed.
Kirk Nurmi, have you ever seen the feds swoop in a case like this? Like, this isn't like the Diddy case. They were talking about, bringing these sex trafficking people from state to state. Like, that makes sense. To me, this is a shooting in the streets of New York, and the feds are going someplace where they shouldn't go.
You're exactly right, Vinny. If you use this theory, you got 3/4 of the murders. Anything that happens over the phone, internet, could be charged under the federal jurisdiction. That's why it's going to be one of the first bridges that the defense is going to have to cross to try to get the murder charge specifically of the federal indictment dropped, particularly because it comes with the possibility of the death penalty. But the jurisdictional component does seem to be weak. And I think that it's certainly going to keep his attorneys busy and build up those fees. But it also puts him in a position, again, as Nima pointed out, where he becomes a political martyr, right? He may even want the death penalty at age 26. Maybe he wants the death penalty. Maybe he wants to be put to death. So maybe he won't want to challenge these charges, take that death imposition and go down a martyr. So, because he's very fixed on his cause. So it's going to be interesting how this plays out. But as an attorney, I'm sure that this jurisdictional claim by the feds is certainly one that could be subject to a hearty challenge.
Eklund, when this case first happened, I'm like, well, the defense is going to have nothing to do here because the evidence is overwhelming. Then he gets charged with terrorism. Now the feds come in. Now there's something for his high-powered defense attorney to do, to fight, to talk about. But answer this, if you can, Eklund. How does all this now impact the chances of a plea?
He's not pleading. I think that he thought he was going to die that day. He was a dead man walking. When you have what he had in the notebook, when you have all of the steps, everything he did, he had one mission, and he actually didn't have a plan for the future, which kind of concludes that he thought he was going to die that day. He's a man with nothing to lose, and that's a very dangerous person.
Kirk, do you think there's a discussion? Do you think the state and the feds are going to work together? Nima, I don't think does. Do you think there's a chance that they do?
Boy, I don't know, because this is so unorthodox. The feds are obviously flexing their muscles here. I don't know why they would do this, what kind of communication they would have, because I'm sure that Mr. Bragg is probably looking to have exclusive domain over this case. He may have that kind of tenuous relationship with the federal authorities, and then the egos get involved, and this could be the true motivation. As petty as it sounds, we lose sight of, in fact, the murder here that happened on the streets of New York. But yeah, those personalities, those inner conflicts that Nima has mentioned is probably the real motivation here. So that could lead to very little communication between these two authorities.
So what order do they go in now, Nima? Who decides which goes first, which goes second? Now, R. Kelly had, similar issues. He had state, he had federal, he had New York, he had Chicago. So this guy's got Pennsylvania, New York, state, and federal. How does that whole thing sort of, if no one's really cooperating, how do they figure that all out?
Well, the good old supremacy clause, we're talking about the Constitution, the feds get to go first, and kind of giving some folks some insight at the Department of Justice. And the reason this doesn't happen is the DOJ has a long-standing policy not to do this. It's called the Pettit policy. And this was someone who was very high up at the DOJ that said, look, even though these types of parallel or subsequent prosecutions, they don't violate double jeopardy. So Mangione's lawyer, Karen Friedman, may be wrong on that. It's called the dual sovereign doctrine. But if you look up this Pettit policy, Vinny, it says that there shouldn't be a subsequent federal prosecution when the state has started, unless there is a compelling federal interest that isn't vindicated in the state case. So that doesn't exist here. So the DOJ seems to be violating its own policy. Now, we know that everyone from the Supreme Court to the DOJ, precedent doesn't really seem to matter anymore. But in my more than 20 years of practice, I've never seen anything like this. But of course, this is a very unique case.
At the end, we get to the sentences and what the potential is here. If you take a look, New York, if he's found guilty of the second-degree murder, which was the original charge, he can get life with parole, and he could get out in 25 years. He'd be like in his 50s. First degree, you do have the maximum of life in prison without the possibility of parole. There'll be some discretion there, but there's an opportunity for that. No death penalty. And then federal murder through use of a firearm, you do have the possibility of the death penalty. So there's a lot at stake, a lot to figure out in all of this. So we obviously will stay on top of the legal aspect of it. But when we come back with our think tank, there's another whole part of this story and this crime, which is the cultural reaction to Luigi Mangione. That's next.
Nine-one.
What do you think about Luigi Mangione, the CEO assassin?
I think he's cool.
He is like a national phenomenon right now. Like, he doesn't even know how loved he is.
Even though the guy got caught, which is very unfortunate, at least he left a very powerful message, and he highlighted how terrible the healthcare system is in America. I think he'll go down as a hero in history.
Wow. All right. I want to put some numbers up because Emerson College did a poll in reacting to this assassination. And I believe everyone in this poll is working under the presumption that Luigi Mangione is, in fact, the killer here. But the question was, do you think the actions of the UHC killer are acceptable or unacceptable? Let's take a look. There are some numbers that should scare you. If you look at the top left gives you the ages, okay, that first column. So 18 to 29-year-olds. 18 to 29-year-olds. 41% of them believe the actions of the UHC killer are either somewhat acceptable or completely acceptable. 41%. More of them found it acceptable than the 33% who said it was completely unacceptable, plus the 7%, which would make 40%, that found it somewhat unacceptable. That's unreal. And then you look at the graph, the older people get, the more unacceptable it becomes. But if you look all the way to the right, the dark blue, these are the people that are saying it is completely acceptable. And you had 17% of those 18 to 29-year-olds. But if you look at the way the graph goes, it goes down, down, down the older you get. 50 to 59, only 4% think it was completely acceptable. But then it starts to nudge up a little bit with the folks who are getting older. Those are your hippies from the 60s. That's who that is. But these numbers are shocking. Eklund Mercy, Kirk Nurmi, Nima Rahmani back with us. Kirk, looking at those numbers, what does it tell you, and what does it tell you about how this case may proceed?
Well, I guess it tells me that I'm old, Vinny, because I'm in the camp that finds this behavior completely unacceptable. But it does demonstrate the support he has, and I think it'd be something that prosecutors and defense attorneys will be looking at when they talk about jurors. There's always the possibility this case goes to trial that somebody of that mindset that thinks it's completely acceptable is going to try to find their way on the jury. When you have a highly profile case like this, you always have to look out for covert jurors who might have some kind of personal gain or vendetta that they want to bring into it. And in this case, that becomes somewhat of a political position. I hate to even call it a political position because we can argue about politics, but murder isn't the answer to the argument. But discourse is, right? So, but these younger people are going to be people that the attorneys in this case are going to need to look at closely if they're trying to act in a covert manner.
Nima, I think prosecutors will attempt to eliminate every young person who got a jury notice to show up for any of these trials if they take place. And the defense is going to try to get rid of anyone who's old.
Probably. And Vinny, let me tell you why those numbers matter. I'm not a mathematician, but 1 out of 12 is about 8%. So that's all it takes to hang this panel. And we're dealing with a pretty liberal jurisdiction. Doesn't matter if it's state or federal in Manhattan. And those numbers may even be higher there, regardless of age. And I'm not condoning violence. Brian Thompson had a family. Violence is never the answer. But if you're prosecuting this case and you want to win this case, you have to understand how deeply disliked the health insurance industry is, and any insurance company for that matter that puts profits over people. Again, like Kirk said, violence is never the answer, but you have to understand the psychology of your potential jurors. Jury selection is the most important thing in any case, but in this particular case, Vinny, it is everything. The only chance that Luigi Mangione has is jury nullification, and this case is ripe for jury nullification more than any I've ever seen.
You say 8%, you look at the people who find it completely acceptable, that number is over 8% when you do a cross-section of all the different ages here. There's other things that I noticed today. Take a look at Mangione before and after. Everyone's talking about the fact that he got a haircut while in jail. Really? Eklund, is that the way it works? You get arrested before you get extradited? You take a little off the side?
Well, if he just so happens to be there when the barber is there, then it could happen. I do agree with Nima. I'm saying that, actually. That's crazy. I do agree with Nima, but I think, right? I think that it's not just age. I think it's if we had another poll with income, it would definitely change. And I think that the federal government coming into this case also actually heightens it. Are we going to change the rules for people in different tax brackets? I know a lot of victims and a lot of victims' families want the DOJ to come in, beg the DOJ to come in, and it doesn't happen. So I think that it's more along the lines of income versus age.
Let's put those pictures back up. I think they did his eyebrows too. If you take a close look, he got the eyebrows trimmed as well. Look, it got totally cleaned up like that quickly. I'm shocked. I'm shocked, but maybe they have, look at it, it's even like a designer sort of cut. It's not like, we're just gonna buzz you like you're in the, all right, you're in jail now, we're just gonna buzz you. What is going on in jail? I don't understand that.
The barbers come in and they have special days. And if you fall in the day in which the barber is there, then you get a haircut.
Wow. All right. Something else is happening. If you take a look at this photo, became right? The photo that was out everywhere because we're trying to find the guy without his mask. Apparently that jacket, which has been identified by some people online, is now flying off the shelves. Everyone's buying the Mangione jacket. And then the book that sort of replicated the words that were written on the bullets and the casings is now #2 nonfiction on Amazon. The book's like more than 10 years old. Is now #2. So this has turned into a cultural phenomena. Unbelievable. All right. Thank you so much to our think tank. Eklund Mercy, Kirk Nurmi, Nima Rahmani. They cover all the angles on this, and we appreciate it. All right, when we return, I will reveal something else you need to know tonight, plus coming up next hour. Coming up on Vinnie Politan Investigates, did Alexi Treviso know she was pregnant when she ran into a hospital bathroom and gave birth? Did she commit first-degree murder? We'll investigate.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates, coming up next, only on Court TV.
Welcome back. Time to reveal something else you need to know tonight. Take a look. There he is, Richard Allen, the Delphi killer. His sentencing will be tomorrow. He's facing at a minimum of 45 years for the murder of these 2 young girls. It was a case that was unsolved for the longest time. Finally, they solved it. They brought the trial. There was a lot of drama and controversy surrounding the trial, but Richard Allen was convicted. You didn't see it on Court TV. We covered it, but you didn't see it because the judge has banned cameras from the courtroom. Court TV producer Barbara McDonald has a preview for us tonight.
Good evening, Vinnie. Tomorrow is sentencing day in the Delphi double murders case. Richard Allen is facing 45 to 130 years in prison for the 2017 murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. They were just 13 years old when they went for a hike on the Monon High Bridge and didn't return. This is also the first time that their families, their loved ones, will get to speak to Richard Allen directly and talk to him about their pain and their loss and what these past 8 years have been like for them. Richard Allen's family, a source tells me, are not planning to attend tomorrow. They say that Richard Allen asked them not to attend, and they don't want to give credence to the verdict that they disagree with. After the sentencing hearing concludes, the prosecution team and members of law enforcement, Indiana State Police, as well as the Carroll County Sheriff's Department will be doing an on-camera press conference that's scheduled to begin about 30 minutes after the sentencing hearing wraps up. We're in Delphi all day tomorrow, and we will be bringing it all to you throughout the day. I'm Barbara McDonald in Delphi. Vinnie, back to you.
And we'll have complete coverage right here tomorrow night on this program. Right now, take a look at your television screens because we have a missing child who needs your help. This is Jennifer Paola Antunez Cruz, 13 years old, just 13 years old, like those 2 girls from Delphi. Missing from Clovis, California since December 10th. If you see Jennifer, please pick up the phone, make a call, make a difference. You can call 911, 1-800-THE-LOST, or you can call the Clovis Police Department in California. That phone number's on your screen. Let's see if we can get Jennifer to a safe place tonight. Don't go anywhere. We have another hour of live true crime. Vinnie Politan Investigates is next. In the meantime, please don't forget to hug the kids.